The slam of the door as Frank walked out still echoes in my ears. On our living room table, filled with the damp smell of Seattle rain, lay a business card that said, "Husband for hire," and a messy notebook crammed with unfamiliar women's names. My hands were shaking, but strangely, a part of my heart felt as if it had gone cold and frozen. I had endured, I had fallen apart, and in that moment, I finally decided I would protect my old age and my heart before anything else. Why I chose myself instead of my husband, I will tell you that story now. You're listening to Silver Story Tree, where the voices of life's late chapters gently bloom again. Subscribe, like, and turn on the bell to hear more heartfelt stories that grow with time. At 5 a.m, the kitchen timer was ticking away. I'm Helen Miller, and I run a small deli shop in a little town outside Seattle, Washington. As always, I was preparing to cook chicken noodle soup to sell at the deli. The sound of the gas burner turning blue filled the quiet morning. While the soup was cooking, I went to the living room and picked up Frank's shirt. As I unfolded the sleeve to sort the laundry, an unfamiliar scent hit my nose. It was a strong, sweet women's perfume. I had never worn perfume like that. Neither had Frank. My hand stopped. I brought the shirt closer to my nose and smelled it again. I was certain this wasn't my smell, and it wasn't Frank's smell either. While frying bacon and scrambling eggs at the breakfast table, that perfume smell kept haunting my mind. I heard Frank's footsteps coming down the stairs. Heavy, thudding steps. I asked brightly as usual, "When did you start wearing perfume like this?" Frank laughed casually as he picked up his fork. He said some woman on the bus was spraying it like crazy. I couldn't ask any more questions after that. Steam rose from the bacon on the kitchen table. The scrambled eggs were puffy and yellow, but my fork kept hovering in midair. I had no appetite. Frank unfolded his newspaper and sipped his coffee, never once meeting my eyes. Something felt off. For the past few months, my husband had been coming home late every evening. He said he had calls. He said he couldn't help it because there was so much repair work. After retirement, Frank had been doing freelance odd jobs. At first, it seemed natural. Both of our pensions were barely enough to cover the house, mortgage and living expenses. But lately, I felt something had changed. One of the regular customers at the deli told me she saw Frank late last night. She said he was laughing with some woman next to an SUV. I just brushed it off. Our neighborhood is small, where everyone knows each other's faces. But those words stuck in my mind. When I tried to sleep at night, those words kept echoing in my ears. A few nights ago, when Frank came home past midnight, the smell of alcohol and perfume mixed together rose from his jacket. I went to the kitchen and opened and closed the pot lid for no reason. I pretended to wash my hands, trying to calm myself down. But I kept feeling anxious. While Frank sat on the sofa watching TV, his phone vibrated several times. I pretended to knit while watching his hand movements. Am I becoming suspicious because I'm getting old? I blamed myself. In nearly 40 years of marriage, I had never doubted my husband. Frank worked quietly, brought money home, and was always kind to me. Why was I doubting such a husband? But I couldn't shake the burning feeling inside. That night, I went through Frank's work clothes to run the laundry. I checked the back pockets of his jeans and felt inside his jacket. Then, something hard like paper caught my fingertips. I slowly pulled it out. It was a small business card. Under the kitchen light, as I looked at the card, my hand trembled. What is this? That thought filled my head. The card had bold letters that read "Husband for hire. Home repairs, errands, companion services." Below that was Frank Miller's name and phone number. I held my breath and kept staring at the card. Only the buzzing of the kitchen fluorescent light could be heard. My heart was racing. When did he make this? He didn't say a word to me about it. My hand trembled slightly. On the back of the card was an email address written in small letters. I put it deep in the drawer, and couldn't bring up a word about it until the next day. The next morning, on my way to the deli, I was passing through Main Street when a small flyer stuck on a telephone pole caught my eye. I stopped the car and got out. When I approached it, it was an advertisement with the same design. The words "Husband for hire" were printed in bold. Frank's name and number were clear. I tore off the flyer and put it in my bag. My hands felt cold. When I got to the deli, I immediately called my neighbor friend Diane. Diane is a friend who lives across the street from my house and works part-time at a local diner. When I showed her the card, she looked at it for a long time and said lots of men do all kinds of things with stuff like this these days. Nobody knows if they're just doing repairs or something more. Those words stung, even as I held the coffee pot and poured coffee for customers. My mind was filled with thoughts of the card. A regular customer at the counter said the soup was blander than yesterday. I mindlessly added more salt. I would never have done that normally. In the evening, Frank said he was going out again. He said he had a booking. I stood at the front door and watched my husband quickly wash his face and put on his jacket. I memorized his work pickup truck's license plate number. Part of me still wanted to side with my husband. I didn't want to create a fight out of a misunderstanding. After Frank left, I sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. A drama was on, but I couldn't hear a single word. I just stared at the clock. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock passed. Only when it was almost midnight did I hear the front door opening. Frank quietly took off his shoes and came inside. I watched him take off his jacket and hang it on the chair. Then, a small piece of paper fell from the jacket pocket. It was a hotel bar receipt. I held my breath and picked it up. The date, time, and amount were printed on it. Tonight, the cost of 2 glasses of wine. At that moment, something inside me crumbled. At the same time, something hardened. I made up my mind. I wouldn't let this pass this time. I resolved to see it with my own eyes. I put the receipt in the drawer and placed it next to the business card. My hand didn't tremble. A few days later on Saturday morning, when Frank was leaving with his toolbox, I secretly grabbed my coat. I was careful not to make noise with the car keys. When the sound of Frank's pickup truck leaving the garage faded, I slightly opened the front door and looked outside. I saw the truck turn the corner and disappear. I quickly got into my SUV and started the engine. I followed at a distance. My heart was pounding. My hands holding the steering wheel were sweating. Frank's truck got on the Seattle outskirts highway heading north. I moved to the next lane and slowly followed from behind. After driving for a while, I saw the truck enter an apartment complex. I parked my car in a parking lot near the entrance and watched from afar. A woman was standing in front of the lobby. She was wearing a long coat and holding a shopping bag. When Frank got out of the truck, the woman greeted him with a bright smile. The two naturally talked like an old married couple. Frank lightly patted the woman's shoulder and went inside. I felt my hands trembling in the car. But strangely, no tears came. Instead, something cold filled my chest. I quickly took out my phone and zoomed in to record a video. I captured everything: the two going into the lobby, the woman pressing the elevator button. My hand was shaking, but the screen was clear. I immediately called Diane. I told her Frank just went into some woman's house. I said I couldn't handle this alone. Diane immediately asked where, and I gave her the apartment complex address. Diane said, "I'll leave now, let's meet at the nearby diner." A little later, I went to a diner in a nearby strip mall. Diane was already sitting by the window. We ordered coffee and sat in seats where we could see the direction of the apartment complex. Diane squeezed my hand tightly. She asked if I was okay. I nodded. I said I was okay. But my voice trembled. Diane went to the diner manager and talked quietly. She asked if Frank and the woman had ever come here together, and if there were parking lot CCTVs. The manager nodded and said he would check. I looked out the window and sipped my coffee. Even though the coffee got cold, I couldn't taste it. I returned home in the evening. Frank wasn't back yet. I went to the bedroom and opened Frank's drawer. While searching between socks and underwear, I found a small spiral notebook. As I opened the notebook with my hand, my heart sank. The notebook had several women's names and addresses written in it. Days and times were crammed in. Monday 2 p.m., Carol. Wednesday 7 p.m., Susan. Friday 10 a.m., Linda. Next to each name was a short note. Light bulb replacement, utilities help, grocery shopping companion. In one corner of the notebook, I saw writing in thick letters. Susan, Wednesday nights, utilities help. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the notebook. I felt like crying, but no tears came. Instead, my resolve hardened. I needed to gather evidence now. The next day, Diane and I went to a local electronics store. We picked out a small recorder in USB. While paying at the register, Diane tapped my arm. She said we may be old, but we're not stupid. I laughed. It felt like I hadn't laughed in a long time. When I got home, I made a plan. Every night sitting next to Frank watching TV, I carefully observed his finger movements unlocking his phone pattern. Up, right, down, left. I watched and memorized it several times. Frank thought I was focused on the drama. One evening, when Frank went into the shower, I quickly grabbed his phone. My hand was shaking, but I drew the pattern I had memorized on the screen. The screen unlocked. A list of text messages appeared. The name Susan was at the top. When I clicked on the message, it said, "Thanks for coming again today. I can get through this because you're here." With trembling hands, I captured several screenshots. The sound of water continued from the shower. I switched back to the lock screen and put the phone back in its place. I was breathing hard. Diane started checking the parking lot CCTV at the diner where she worked. She asked the manager for help to look at footage from certain evenings. Frank's pickup truck license plate appeared several times. The same car was always parked next to it. Diane took pictures and sent them to me. We sat at the kitchen table every weekend with notebooks spread out. We carefully wrote down dates, times, car numbers, the woman's clothes and hair color. Diane poured coffee and said, "This is enough." I nodded, but one part of my heart still felt heavy. One weekend, my daughter Amy came home from Seattle. I wanted to tell Amy everything, but I thought it wasn't time yet. Instead, I carefully asked, "If Mom gets divorced, will you be on Mom's side?" Amy laughed, thinking it was a joke. She said of course. But seeing the tears welling up in my eyes, Amy's face hardened. She asked what was wrong. I said I was fine. I brushed it off, saying I was just emotionally sensitive these days. Amy held my hand but didn't ask more questions. Meanwhile, Frank still went out late, saying he was dying from so many calls. I sat at the dining table eating a cold dinner, staring at his empty chair. That seat used to feel warm, but now it felt completely empty. In my drawer, business cards, spiral notebooks, text captures, and CCTV photos were piling up. Every night, I opened that drawer and steadied my breathing. I muttered to myself that this would all be over soon. My heart, this long patience, would all end soon. One rainy weekday evening, I could hear raindrops tapping on the window. I deliberately asked Frank, "Can you take me to the dentist before I open the deli tomorrow?" Frank folded his newspaper and hesitated for a moment. He said he had a booking tomorrow evening. I looked straight into his eyes. I said I wanted to go with him to that booking. Frank's face hardened. He asked what I was talking about. I said quietly, "I want to know where you're going and who you're meeting." Frank looked flustered and said I was suspecting him for no reason. Then left the room. I watched his back and mentally reviewed tomorrow's plan again. The next evening, Diane parked her car in a parking lot near the apartment complex and waited. I watched from the window as Frank packed his tool bag at home. I heard the pickup truck engine start. I quickly put on my coat and got in my car. Frank's truck headed to that apartment complex as expected. I followed slowly from behind. As I entered the complex entrance, a woman named Susan was standing in front of the lobby. She was wearing a long cardigan and holding a small bag. When Frank got out of the car, the woman smiled brightly and waved. I watched the two heading to the elevator from behind the lobby. Glass door, holding my breath. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. But strangely, no tears came. Instead, I felt something hardening inside me. I immediately went to the building management office. When I knocked, a middle-aged man came out. I said as calmly as possible, "My husband seems to be doing business here without permission." I said residents were uncomfortable. The man nodded and said he would check the CCTV. On the monitor screen, Frank and Susan, laughing warmly as he carried shopping bags, were clearly captured. Footage from various dates and times came up. With a trembling voice, I asked him to copy those videos to a USB. The man hesitated for a moment, then looked at my eyes and quietly nodded. That night, I placed items one by one on the living room table. Business card, spiral notebook, printed text captures, USB with CCTV footage. When Frank came home, all the evidence was already spread out on the table. I sat on the sofa waiting for my husband. Frank opened the front door and came in. Then froze when he saw the items on the table. I said quietly, was all this just work? Or were you selling my retirement to play husband at another woman's house? Frank's face slowly crumbled. Right then, the front door opened again. Amy quietly entered the house. I had called my daughter ahead of time. I told her to please come today. Amy looked at the evidence on the table and stared straight at her dad. She asked what was going on. I didn't answer. Frank had to say it himself. Amy asked again, Dad, what is this? Frank slumped onto the sofa and couldn't open his mouth for a long time. The wall clock ticked away. The living room was filled with heavy silence. I sat still and waited for my husband to speak. Frank started speaking in a trembling voice. After retirement, he felt that pension and Social Security alone weren't enough for the house mortgage and living expenses. At first, he really only did small repairs and errands, changing light bulbs, hanging shelves, helping with grocery shopping. But one day, some female clients started asking him to stay a little longer. They asked him to have dinner together. They said they were lonely. Frank said he refused at first, but because of the cash pressed into his hands, he gradually crossed the line. Susan said she would pay the utilities and electric bills for him. She promised to open a small savings account for him. Frank hung his head and said that at first it seemed like just help. But at some point, it became not help but a relationship. I let out the voice I'd been holding in. Then what about the money that went out of our joint account every month? What was all that? Amy immediately opened her laptop and checked the online banking records. Numbers scrolled up on the screen. Over the past year, there were several suspicious transfer records. There were also transfers to someone named Susan. Hotel, bar and restaurant charges lined up one after another. Amy's face hardened and she said, this isn't just work, it's betrayal. She called him Dad, but her voice had gone cold. Frank covered his face with both hands. He said he didn't want to ask us for help. It was his last pride as a man. He didn't want to become an incompetent person in front of his daughter and wife. But those words no longer comforted me. I listened silently, then quietly stood up. I went to the drawer and got my signature stamp and envelope of documents. I put them on the table and said, from now on, we'll talk not with excuses but with documents and numbers. Divorce, property division, let's check everything with a lawyer. Frank asked in a trembling voice, Helen, are you really going to push me this far? I didn't answer. Instead, I looked out the window. Raindrops flowed down the glass. Watching those water trails, I thought, I won't let my life flow away like this. Amy put her hand on my shoulder. Mom, I'll help you. I nodded. I felt my daughter's warm touch. That night, the three of us sat in the living room and talked until dawn. Actually, more precisely, Frank talked while Amy and I listened. And I hardened my heart. For several weeks, Amy and I went back and forth between the county courthouse and the lawyer's office. Every time we walked down the hallway, the sound of our shoes echoed. The smell of documents, fluorescent lights, the cold touch of waiting room chairs felt unfamiliar. But strangely, I wasn't scared. Rather, I felt like I was accomplishing something. During the first consultation at the lawyer's office, I learned a shocking fact. The house we'd lived in for over 30 years was in Frank's name alone. I had never checked it. I just assumed it was joint ownership. My heart sank. But the lawyer said it was okay. Considering the length of marriage and contribution, I could sufficiently claim ownership. The money I earned at the deli also helped the household, and I took care of all the housework. The lawyer reviewed the evidence I had collected one by one. Spiral notebook, text captures, CCTV footage were neatly filed away. Frank refused to sign at first. He said he had rights too. But a few days later, he heard from Susan. She told him not to come anymore. When Frank lost his support, he finally sat at the negotiation table. The negotiation was long and tedious. In the law office conference room, we sat across from each other calculating numbers. House value, bank balance, pension, savings account. Everything was converted to numbers. Emotions were removed, only the sound of calculators clicking echoed. I found that easier actually. At the end of negotiations, we decided to transfer the house title to my sole name. Some bank balance and a small amount of pension were left as Frank's share. Frank bowed his head and signed the documents. The sound of the pen scratching was unusually loud. Amy and I went to the title company. When signing the new documents, my hand trembled. I held the pen and stared at the paper for a long time. The ownership certificate with only my name. Helen Miller. That name felt strange. At the same time, it felt like something had found its place. When I got home, I neatly packed Frank's clothes and tools into boxes. Jacket, work clothes, toolbox, one by one. I pushed them to one side of the garage and closed the door. Dust rose slightly. Frank moved to a small studio apartment nearby. When he stood in front of the house for the last time, he asked, "Will you ever be able to forgive me?" I didn't answer. I quietly closed the garage door. The sound of the door closing was solid. A few days later, I went to the local bank. With the teller, I drafted a new will. I wrote that I would leave the house and savings, equally to Amy and future grandchildren. Signing at the very end of the will, I remembered the words written in one corner of the spiral notebook. Utilities help. Now the manager of my life was me. Not anyone else, but me taking care of my own life. That thought warmed my chest. As I left the bank, I looked up at the sky. Sunlight shone through the clouds. After the divorce and title transfer procedures were all completed, it was a morning after spring rain had stopped. I could hear birds chirping beyond the window. I slowly walked alone to the deli along Main Street. Rainwater remaining on the asphalt sparkled in the sunlight. It used to be a road Frank drove me on. But now I drove myself. Opened the door myself, and flipped the open sign myself. The glass door opened with a jingling sound. Morning sunlight poured into the deli. Diane came into the deli with warm coffee. As soon as she opened the door, the coffee scent filled the room. Diane smiled and said, "Your face finally looks alive now, Helen." I laughed. It felt like the first genuine laugh in a long time. I put up new paper at the deli entrance. It said, "Hearty home cooking even if you live alone, Helen's Deli." I wrote it carefully by hand. The letters were crooked, but it felt rewarding because my heart was in it. Customers started coming in one by one. More and more neighborhood seniors came to eat warm soup and sandwiches. Grandmothers living alone, grandfathers who lost their wives, neighbors whose children lived far away. I could smile while listening to customers' stories. Their loneliness and joy all felt like mine. Every weekend, Amy came down from Seattle. We went grocery shopping together and discussed deli menu items. One day, Amy made a suggestion: "If you ever want to leave this neighborhood, let's look at a condo in Seattle together." I shook my head. I said I still liked it here. One day, while organizing the attic at home, I found a small box. Frank's spiral notebook, business card, and USB with CCTV footage were inside. I stared into the box for a long time. I wondered what to do with this. I took the box to nearby Lake Park. I sat on a bench and looked at the calm lake. Ripples gently undulated. I put the box on my lap and sat like that for a while. The sight of birds playing by the water was peaceful. Without the evidence I collected at this time, I would still be living pretending not to know. That thought occurred to me. The evidence gave me courage. It gave me the strength to face the truth. But now, I no longer needed to cling to the past. I quietly took out the items in the box one by one. Business card, notebook, printed texts went into the trash. Finally, I held the USB in my hand and threw it toward the lake. The small object flew through the air, drawing a circle. Splash, it sank into the water. The ripples swelled for a moment, then calmed again. I took a deep breath. Spring air entered my lungs. My chest felt refreshed. It's really over now, I thought. In the car on the way home, I muttered to myself. Suspicion hurt my heart, but confirmation protected me. The day I saw my husband's two faces, I finally saw the real face of my own life. My reflection in the mirror didn't feel strange. Now I wasn't someone's wife, I was just Helen. Helen who runs a deli, Helen who cooks warm soup, Helen who laughs and talks with neighbors. That was all of me, and that was enough. When I closed the deli door in the evening, flipping the open sign, I thought, I'll open this door again tomorrow. With my own hands, by my own will, on my own time. That thought made me smile. When I came home and sat on the sofa, the seat next to me was empty. But I wasn't lonely. Rather, I felt comfortable. Turning on the TV and drinking warm tea, I spent time alone. That now felt natural. Night deepened and stars appeared outside the window. I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. And I made this resolution: now the owner of my old age is me. No one can steal my time. That resolution wrapped around me like a warm blanket. As I closed my eyes, I thought one last time. Those words written on Frank's business card, husband for hire. In the end, he wasn't a real husband but a substitute. But now I became the real protagonist of my life. That was the real freedom I found. Everyone, have you ever been deeply betrayed by someone you truly trusted? Like I was? Through what happened, I learned that even new to Lotto, I must protect my own dignity and my own life with my own hands. I also realized that inside me, there is still a small but steady courage and hope left. If you have similar wounds or memories, I would be grateful if you could gently share them in the comments. I believe that your courage will become great comfort and strength to someone else. If my story stayed with you today, please walk with me by subscribing and liking this channel. And if someone comes to mind, please quietly share this video with them. Thank you sincerely for listening. And I hope your tomorrow will feel a little lighter and healthier.